So I got this truck pushed back in the shop, engine hanging on the cherry picker here, ready to go back in. Got the spacer between the flywheel and the block on, the flywheel installed, pilot bearing in, and was ready to install the clutch. Customer said the clutch was a couple of years old, so we didn't like to replace it, but these springs are broken inside the clutch. Two of the torsional damper springs in here are busted. So now we need a clutch, and I won't see it. Maybe he's going to air freight it here. I might get it for tomorrow morning. Oh joy. So there's the new clutch assembly installed. Transmission ready, pilot bearing in, fork greased, pivot greased, and new gasket on the exhaust. Ready to drop it in. Well, there's the engine back in on the bottom end, all done up, the motor mounts, the bell housing bolts. What caught me off guard was this engine actually tilts about 10 degrees to the right, and I thought it was level, so next time I do this I'll slant the engine slightly. It's like an old slant 6, but not quite as much. Exhaust reconnected. All the bell housing bolts done up. I was able to get that coolant sensor. You can see the white connector up there, and then below it is the knock sensor connector. I was able to get it from underneath here. Much easier to connect than it is to disconnect. So now we lower it and work at it from the top. So ask me if I'm a happy camper. Not. Listen to this high frequency whine. It's not in the drive belt area. I took the drive belt completely off. It's something internal in the engine. Bring the RPM up. Let it idle. It almost sounds like a wind whistle, but I can't pinpoint where it's coming from. And I said it's not in the drive belt area. Sounds loud around the oil filter housing, but it's not the oil filter. I checked to make sure it's the right one. I even changed it a second time. Oh my goodness sakes. So we're about to remove this engine and do an exploratory in here. Fix the cam timing error issue, the coolant leak, and the hopefully the noise. Preliminary to removing the engine, I have actually drained all of the engine oil out of this thing, and I'm going to briefly start it to hear if that noise is present without any oil in it, because I'm wondering if it's related to the oil pump pickup, maybe an O-ring leaking, and theoretically if it's oil pump related it shouldn't make noise. And no, I'm not going to run it for any length of time. It's just a few seconds because the noise was present on an initial start. So I'm going to go in the cab and start it up. The noise is still present without any oil in the engine. So I don't think it's oil pump related. I believe it to be timing gear, timing chain related. Oh well, let's pull the engine out. So I can't see anything wrong causing that whine. The chain wasn't over tight. The static timing marks were lined up. This one here lined up with that mark back there, and this one here lined up with that. But now I'm comparing the cam phasers. And I've got this one lined up on the tooth on the top edge of that notch, that one lined up, that one lined up across. Have a look at the position of this ear, which is the reluctor. You can see it's in the center of that tooth, and on this one it's about 1/8 of an inch over, and these are already completely relaxed. So something's wrong with this phaser that, in my opinion, is causing the P0016, I think it was, cam timing error. Again, that mark is lined up here on the tooth, on the straight edge underneath. That one's lined up, that one's lined up. But if you look at this position of this reluctor tooth compared to this reluctor tooth, I believe that's the cause of the P0016. So we got a new OE phaser coming. We're going to look at how it fares, but I can't see anything wrong with the timing chain, the tensioner, the guides for that horrendous whine. So I had compared the exhaust cam sprocket to the aftermarket sprocket, and it looks pretty much exactly the same. The timing mark's in the same spot, the teeth are lined up. But I'm going to show you something. So here's the original sprocket. There's a dowel to line it up. And if I put it on there and wiggle it, there's about a 32nd of an inch of play. If I put this sprocket on, which is the new one, how are you supposed to accurately time this thing when you can almost move it a quarter of a tooth? Wow. I'm going to reuse the original sprocket. I'm not sure if the pitch on the sprocket teeth is causing the whine, but it's putting this original sprocket back on. It has a little tiny bit of wear on it. This one is much snugger. Oh well, OE aftermarket OE parts, what are you going to do? So we're back working on this Toyota, and here is the aftermarket cam phaser, and you can see where the reluctor is at rest on that one, and here is the new one. The new OE one compared to the original one. You see it's in the middle of that ear, middle of this ear, and this one is off by about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm hoping that that's what's causing the cam timing error, because it was statically timed correctly as far as I could tell when I took it apart. So we're going to put it back together with this new phaser from Toyota. Also, this gear I think is what was whining. Its gear drives the right balance shaft. So I'm going to reuse the original gear because there's very little wear on it, and put the rest of this thing back together again. So there's the new phaser. I reused the original cam gear because of the slop that was in the new one. This mark lines up with this pointer in the back and that colored link. This mark lines up with this colored link and that one in the back. Now it's not right on the center. It's off to one side if you look at it from this angle here. It's off by about, I think they say 13 degrees. So that colored link is lined up. And down at the bottom here, that colored link is lined up. And the keyway is vertical. Now I put a white dot on the back of the block and the pulley here, or the reluctor tooth. Now we're going to turn it a couple of turns and make sure it's lined up again. So I've turned it a couple of revolutions on the crank. That mark's lined up. Now the colored links don't line up anymore once you've turned the engine. They're just for initial timing, but this mark lines up with that pointer, and this mark lines up with this pointer. Guides are on, the tensioner's pulled. Now we'll clean up the surfaces and put some new seals on the cover and put it back together again. Well, there it is, back together and running, nice and quiet. Damn aftermarket parts. No ticking, no whining. Let's have a look at the codes. So let's see if there's any codes in this thing. Current codes? Nothing. How about pending codes? Well, that's a good sign. That P0016 is a 2-trip code, so first it'll set a pending code, and then the next time you drive it, or next time you drive cycle, it'll mature and turn the check engine light on. So I'm going to take this for a road test, watching some VVT data, and break in the rings. There was a pre-existing condition with this thing where it had an evap system problem, so maybe we'll have a quick look at that.